Hello and welcome to this game review. In this one, as usual, we will take a very good look at forcing moves and how to spot them in our games. So this started as the Queen's Gambit, declined. After knight f3, black played bishop b4, which is a fine move. This is the start of the Rogozin defense, a variation of the Queen's Gambit. Of course, black has a lot of moves here like c5 or knight bd7 or bishop e7 or even bishop d6. b6, there are plenty of moves, so there's many ways to play this position. Bishop b4 is one of them, and here black wants to develop as actively as possible, oftentimes using this diagonal to do something, and also just to castle. The bishop might sometimes go back if white is provoked into doing something about the bishop itself. So bishop d2, castles a3, and the black takes this bishop. So now black has lost the bishop pair, white has an advantage of the bishop pair, but on the other hand, black has somewhat of a lead in development. He has almost finished development, he has 3 pieces developed, and he has a nice center against white's 2 pieces developed, so black has an advantage there. Also, he could try to take this pawn, and while white can probably take back the pawn, it will again take quite a while, and in the meantime black can finish his development like this, or in different ways as well. Knight bd7 is also fine, and knight e4, queen c2, c5. So at the moment black can at any point take this bishop, but later if we are not able to take this bishop, then it might be quite dangerous because we do not have a dark squared bishop, which will make this bishop quite strong on this diagonal, as we will see. So a few moves later, both sides finish development, and here black could basically just take a pawn, and after this, if white wants to take the pawn, he will be forced to exchange the light squared bishops, for example like this, and at the end of this, black can even gain some initiative by taking on d4, and the point is, after whatever white does, his structure will be ruined. For example, after this we can take, and either white can exchange queens, or he should probably keep the queens. White is left with a weak pawn on c3. Otherwise, white cannot take here. If he exchanges queens first and takes here, this structure is fine for white, but after, for example, f6 and e5, which is very instructive to block this bishop, black will have somewhat of an advantage because this bishop is kind of trapped. But okay, knight d6. In general, we shouldn't go back in chess unless we are forced to. When this knight was on a great square, there's no reason to go back. Now knight g5, but this doesn't really make sense. White's pieces are over here, so an attack has no chance of working at this point. Bishop c4. So now black has won a pawn, g6, and g6, of course, we had to stop mate. And white's compensation lies in the fact that he has this bishop on c3, and now after g6 this diagonal has been opened, so there are quite some long-term dangers, so we should be a bit careful. So white should probably open up his bishop as soon as possible and try to do some kind of attacking stuff. But bishop h5 was played, which is kind of a funny move. It's like I blundered the bishop, please take my bishop, but of course this is very obvious, this is checkmate. And the move itself doesn't threaten anything. The pawn on g6 is defended twice, so any sacrifice will be useless. So basically this is a waste of a move. Knight f6 is played, but this was a great chance for black to do something like queen d8. Now attacking the knight. The knight can't move because then the bishop will actually hang. And for example, after defending it, after, for example, knight f5, the pawn on h4 is attacked. There is pressure on d4 as well, and white's pieces look very stupid. And as a general rule, if we can improve a piece with tempo, we should do that. And the queen on c8 is useless, the queen on d8 is at least attacking the knight. So knight f6, bishop f3, and rook e8. But this move is very careless. Black should understand that this bishop is always on c3, even though it is looking at his pawn. There is this tension which can be gotten rid of at any point, and now the knight on f6 is undefended, and black did not consider his opponent's forcing moves before playing rook e8. If we imagine the move rook e8, what forcing moves does white have? Well, all the captures here are taken care of. This is defended as well. But white can take the pawn here, after which the bishop is attacking the knight. So it will be a discovered attack on two knights. Black can survive. He may lose a pawn, probably, but not the game. But either way, this is very careless. So b3 instead. Black moves, and now white takes. And after queen c5, now there's a difference that the bishop is pinned. So this is very well spotted by black. Now b4, queen c7, but now the c4 square is terribly weakened. Rook a c1, rook a c8. And now, a few moves later, black is taking over the initiative, as white has not really gotten anything with his bishop. But here, knight b5 was played, decentralizing the knight again. But the knight is not really going to do anything on b5, because after bishop b2, all of its forward moves are covered, and now the rook is open and the bishop is doing the same job as it was before, and the knight is simply off the board at the moment. Instead, we should try to block this bishop, for example with f6, kicking away the knight, and then we can probably play knight e5. If white wants to take, sure, then he will not have his bishop pair anymore, and white's pieces are quite badly placed, and black is a pawn up for nothing. So instead, knight b5. A few moves later, white played this move b5, but he did have this nice tactic of knight takes e6, now that the e6 is not as well defended. After rook e6, bishop d5 is the point, first using the pin on the diagonal, also using the pin here, so black cannot take, and his position is lost. Instead, b5, knight f5, queen c3, knight c5, probably improving the queen should be considered, but okay, knight c5, and now unfortunately this pawn is undefended. So again, before making our move, we have to imagine the opponent's checks, captures, and attacks, and clearly we do not want to lose this pawn, which is guarding this whole battery on the diagonal. Of course, we have ideas of our own, but chess is played by two players usually, and after knight c5, unfortunately white is breaking through. But at least we have this great move, queen g7, which black found, and now the queens are exchanged. And at the end of this, white still has the bishop pair, but his bishops are not that useful anymore, and the pawn on a4 is going to drop most likely. Bishop e5, but now black finds the nice forcing move. Instead of taking the pawn, even better is to fork 3 pieces. And after white saves the exchange, black is just winning a whole piece. Instead, white should of course move the bishop and instead lose a rook for a knight instead of a full bishop. But black takes the wrong piece, but this is fine as well. Knight f5. Black could have played a nice forcing move in bishop takes b5. Even though the pawn looks defended, there are big issues with white's back rank. For example, now the bishop cannot be taken, and if here, then now again the bishop can't be taken because of checkmate. So knight f5, this is fine. e4 is a good idea by white to open up the position somewhat. Black takes, and the knight e7. Again, we should not go back in chess unless we are absolutely forced to. And the knight e7 here, the knight is just worsely placed on e7. There are various things to improve here. For example, the rooks. The rook can go to d8 if needed, or we can try to exchange pieces since we are material up. Bishop d5, for example, and white cannot avoid many exchanges because we can either exchange the bishop or the rook. White cannot get rid of both threats. But knight e7, now white could have played the nice move bishop b7, attacking the rook. It's a forcing move, and if the rook moves to d8, the only safe square, and then after knight e4, the knight is threatening knight f6 check or knight d6 as a fork, and black is actually in a little bit of trouble. Instead, h4 happens, and here there's some time trouble, but especially when we're in time trouble, our focus should always be on forcing moves, checks, captures, attacks. We don't really have to think about anything else, and our results will be fine. bishop b3, rook b1. Black takes a pawn and plays the move rook c2, but unfortunately this doesn't consider the opponent's forcing moves, and here the bishop can just take the rook. Instead we can exchange pieces with bishop to c2. This forces the exchange, and now black is still an exchange up. These pieces aren't really doing anything. There's a passed pawn as well, so black is winning. So after this, a lot of chaos ensues. Knight g7 is a strange move. Now after rook c8, white would have to exchange rooks, and the pawn here is dropping. So rook d8, and here bishop c3. But after bishop f6, this is a skewer tactic, a pin, and the black is probably going to lose some material. So instead bishop c3, and a few moves later rook e8 is played, kind of similar to black's rook c2, again not considering his opponent's forcing moves, and unfortunately bishops do go backwards, and the rook is taken, and the rest of the game not much happened as black's material advantage is just way too much. So generally, positionally there's quite a lot to discuss here, but of course chess is dominated by tactics, and we should always try to find the forcing moves not only for ourselves but also for the opponent.